Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Richard Skipper celebrates the best in entertainment. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My show is all about celebrating. It's about celebrating life. It's about celebrating authors. It's about celebrating great actresses. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? There's so many things to celebrate in this world if we just take the time to do so. I read today, just before we went live, that today is National Chocolate Day. So I hope you've got a box of chocolates wherever you are. It's also National Father and Daughter Take a Walk Day. So we'll talk to Fredrick about Alice's relationship with her father. And it's also National Alice Pearce Day. It's National Fredrick Tucker Day. It's National Let's Celebrate Sweet Oddball Day. And I am an oddball myself, so I am thrilled that Fredrick is here. Before we delve into this amazing, exhaustive, researched book, I want to celebrate you for a moment. And I want to talk about you. You are from my home state of South Carolina.
Yeah.
So how is everything in my home state?
It's hot right now, but things are much better here than this time a year ago or in January of this year, February. Things are a lot better.
Now, for everyone who doesn't know, where exactly in South Carolina are you? And can you tell us a little bit about the area?
I'm in the foothills of South Carolina, not far from the North Carolina border, about hour and a half from Charlotte, North Carolina, about 2.5 hours from Atlanta, Georgia. So we're not on the coast. Mm-hmm. We're in the foothills.
Now, I took a direct path to New York as soon as I graduated from high school. You took a completely different path, and you became an educator. What exactly did you teach, and for how many years did you teach?
Well, I taught almost 30 years, for 20 of those in 6th grade. Mm-hmm. Taught 4th grade for 7 years. I had 2 years as a curriculum facilitator, which was sort of a go-between the faculty and the administration. But 6th grade was my main subject. I loved that age. The last 11 or 12 years that I taught, I only taught social studies. Mm-hmm. And in South Carolina, in the 6th grade, the curriculum is ancient world history. So Egypt, China, Greece, Rome, India, the Renaissance, all that stuff. In the ancient world.
Now, there comes a point in a person's life where it's time to retire, it's time to move on. Although the word retire cannot be applied to you, Fredrick, I'm sure you know that. What was the deciding factor for you to, and I want to say God bless you. I mean, we don't pay enough attention to our educators and our teachers, so I thank you for that. But what was the deciding factor for you when you knew that it was time for you to move on and really delve your life into your passion of writing? You're an amazing writer. I want you to know that. And the research that you've done.
Well, I think the key word is technology. I used to tell my kids in my class that in my room, T did not stand for technology. It stands for Tucker. And I didn't use much technology. I said, we always use the Tucker method. And it worked all those years. And near the end of my teaching career, we were kind of, I don't want to say pressured, but we were kind of gently pushed or edged toward using something called a smart board. Mm-hmm. And I was used to the marker board, and before that, the chalkboard. And I didn't want to give up my textbook. I didn't want to teach using this smart board, which projected everything, onto the screen. And the kids loved my class. They really did, because we didn't use the laptops. They had all been issued laptops by the school district, every kid in the whole school district. And but we didn't use them in my room. We used the textbook, and we discussed, and I told it like a story. Because, you know, when you're in the 6th grade and you've only studied American history up to that point, you have no concept of the world, no concept of the current world, much less, you know,
now,
5,000 years ago.
When you talk about the Tucker method, I'm going to assume that you're talking yellow legal pads, pen and paper, typewriter, all of those methods. Do you still?
Well, not typewriter now. Typewriter. I have graduated to and I can't stand laptops. Oh my gosh, no. I learned how to type on a manual typewriter. In fact, my mother was my typing teacher at school, and so my touch is very heavy, and I can't stand a keyboard on a laptop. And that was another thing, they were wanting me to use that laptop. So no, you know, I'm pretty good at the computer, but I just didn't want that to be. I didn't want that to run my classroom. So, and I was getting near the end, so you know, they were okay with that, and so I just eased on out.
Well, you and I both emerged, I mean, give or take a year or two. I think I'm older than you are. We're from the same age. And we grew up at a time where people watch television. That'll bring us to our books. They were not immersed with their devices all the time. We communicated with each other. A lot's changed since I first left South Carolina 42 years ago. What have you embraced as far as this new world of technology and social media is concerned? And what do you find that you're still resisting?
Oh, well, I love Facebook. I can't figure out Twitter or Instagram, because I like to write lengthy posts and put a lot of pictures, and those other two things don't suit me. But I love being able to reach people more quickly than we did. You know, I think about how wonderful cell phones are traveling today. I mean, I remember one time I was stranded driving by myself from Charleston to here, which is a 3-hour drive. Had car trouble. You know, you got to look for a pay phone. There's no pay phone on the interstate. I had to climb over a fence and hike up a road and knock on some woman's back door. She was standing there frying pork chops. I never will forget. And, you know, she didn't know me. I didn't know her. I had to beg to use her telephone. So I guess, you know, cell phones and I do love word processing. I think, you know, that's wonderful. But I still have a landline telephone. And
I do too.
I still have a push lawnmower. Now, not a rotary blade, but it's gas powered. But I'm very traditional. I like old ways, and so.
And I would have been surprised if that woman invited you in to enjoy those pork chops with her. Did that happen?
She barely looked up. Her husband was on the couch, and he motioned for me to come on in. You know, screen doors unlocked. You know, of course, this was like 1983. Different world.
It was a completely different world. I want to go back for a moment because I always like to go back to that 5-year-old self before you start school, before peer pressure is put upon you, teachers start molding you into what they think you should be or you shouldn't be. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up in South Carolina? And I know in the preface to your book, you talk a little bit about your introduction to Alice Pearce, which is going to take us to that point.
Well, I'm an only child and grew up in a very small town. It was very much like Mayberry on the Andy Griffith Show. We had our own Otis, our own town drunk, and we had a whole main street full of Aunt Bees. And when I was born, my parents were renting rooms in an old house from a lady who lived in half the house and they lived in the other half. And she became very close to me, just like a grandmother. And but my parents both worked, so I had to go to a nursery school. The word daycare hadn't been invented yet. Nursery school, not a kindergarten, a nursery school. But anyway, you know, they teach you ABCs and how to tie your shoes and all that. But I didn't always like it. And I would beg, well, sometimes I would cry to get to stay with this lady. Everybody called her Annie. Now, people up north would know it as Auntie or Auntie. We down here say Annie. And we watched a lot of reruns on television every morning. She would make hot tea and cinnamon toast, and we would watch I Love Lucy. These were all reruns, you know. These The Real McCoys, December Bride, Danny Thomas Show, all those things, and just have a ball. So I was exposed to sitcoms way back. And as far as writing or stories, my parents read to me from a very early age, but I most enjoyed it when they made up their own stories. So I can remember my father sitting on the front porch with me, and we would have a Coca-Cola float, you know, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream or a Dr. Pepper float. And he would make up these stories that sometimes it'd be about people that we knew, but a lot of times it would be about animals, because I was crazy about, now not jungle animals, farm animals. That was more my thing. But I had a wonderful childhood, very loving parents, and all those people on Main Street, you know, were very dear to me, and living near them really shaped my young life before I went to school.
Well, as I said earlier, you are an amazing writer. The detail in this book is unbelievable. There were moments where I could picture everything so vividly. I was reading again today. I went over and looked over some of the passages just to get a remembrance of everything. And I was reading about her second marriage. And the way you described the hat she was wearing and the table at the Coronado Hotel and everything, you took the reader right there. I want to know, when your father was telling you these stories growing up, did you ever put those stories on paper, or did you ever aspire to write along those lines?
When I was in college, I recorded a lot of my earliest memories going back to age 3. And I think I was a freshman in college, and I felt that it was really necessary to capture a lot of that. And I'm so glad, because now I have that written record, and I wouldn't have remembered all that by age 62. So I did write some of those stories down. I had a good friend who worked for my grandfather, and she introduced me to drawing. And I spent a lot of my time drawing, even into my high school and college years. Drawing more so than writing, but I did make my own comic books. I was obsessed with an afternoon soap opera called Dark Shadows.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I used to make my own Dark Shadows comic books, and I would write stories in that format. But I never really, you know, wrote any narratives, really.
Now, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and I want to tell you, I made a comic book of the entire motion picture Gone with the Wind. That took a year. That took a whole year. And I actually drew it in a large scrapbook on the scrapbook pages. I didn't use the backs of the pages, just the fronts, and colored every scene. And I had to go see Gone with the Wind about 6 times. And I would take a notepad in the theater, you know, and I would, when the scene changed, I would note where it was and who was in the scene and what they wore, and even tried to sketch costumes and all, because back then we had no books detailing, we had no internet, we had no videotapes, and so it was difficult for people like me who were details freaks. And yes, I am a details freak.
Well, I want to take everybody back. I want to take everyone back to that era for a moment. You talk about these films. I mean, Disney was very smart long before Netflix. All of his films would be released every 7 years for new generations to see. If you missed them when they came into a theater for sometimes 3 nights, if you were in a small town like Conway, where I'm from, a movie would come in, you were lucky if it played more than 1 or 2 days. And then when shows were on TV, Wizard of Oz, my favorite film, you waited a year to see it, and you didn't put in the VCR, do all these things. We also grew up at a time where there were 3 networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. All of those networks vied for the largest demographic that they could get. And therefore, both you and I grew up not only seeing contemporary artists, but we saw those artists from our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation. And that's when you first began to become aware of character actors and actresses.
Yeah.
What was it about the character actors and actresses that resonated with you?
Gosh, I wish I knew. I think that they reminded me, though, of the people in my small town. I think I felt a connection with them. For instance, people like Rita Shaw. Do you know?
Oh, of course.
Rita Shaw, I look at her today and she's just like an old friend. I mean, she seems like somebody that I would have known. Same thing with Madge Blake. These are 2 great favorites of mine. But I was a big fan of The Wizard of Oz too, and I watched it faithfully. That was the only Sunday night I was allowed to skip church. The Wizard of Oz. So I never saw Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. I was always in church on a Sunday night, but loved The Wizard of Oz. And of course, who did I love most? People like Margaret Hamilton and Clara Blandick. Of course, you know, Ray Bolger and Burt Lahr and Jack Haley were all characters, really, not your typical leading actors. But I guess, I don't know, I identified with them because I think I regarded myself as sort of a character actor, if you will. When we would play make-believe at nursery school, you know, television had that influence, and there were many Westerns on back then. And so the boys would all play cowboys and Indians, that kind of thing, you know. I always wanted to stay back at the campsite and be the camp cook. I did not want to go out and shoot Indians and all that.
Hop sing.
And the other boys could not figure that out. They could not get that. So it's been part of me forever.
But do you remember when your family got their first color television set?
Yes, I do. 1969. My daddy bought it without my mother knowing it. And it was at Christmas time, just after Christmas. And he had gotten a deal on it and brought it home. And she fussed and fumed for I don't know how long. We don't need that thing. We don't need color. We've got a good set. It works fine, you know. But I was tickled to death because I finally get to see The Wizard of Oz in color. I had not seen it on the movie screen at that time, so I did not know the colors. The first thing I did get to see in color was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, the very first year it came out.
Which was Leanne Warren, dear friend of mine.
Oh, really?
Yes. You know, meeting her, because again, I said we come from the same era, was one of the true highlights of my life.
I'll bet. Now, see, I wanted to meet Pat Carroll or Joe Van Fleet, you know, even Celeste Holm.
Yeah, well, Celeste was also a good friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had to go to a friend's house to watch Cinderella, though, because that was 1965. So that was before our color set.
Well, I bring this up because once everybody started getting color televisions, my grandparents got our first color television set. And every Sunday night we would go and we watch Disney, The Wonderful World of Color, and the shows. Bonanza was in color. And all of these incredible shows to see in color for the first time. But what started happening was that shows that were there before color, as they began to transition, a lot of those black and white episodes ended up on back shelves. And I mentioned this because your introduction to Bewitched, and of course Gladys Kravitz, was not Alice Pearce originally. It was Sandra Gould. Am I correct?
No, I remember Alice and when the black and whites originally ran. I don't remember the first season, but I clearly remember an episode from the second season with Alice. But that's the only episode I remember. And then it went into daytime reruns in 1968 and 69 on ABC. So I saw her then because the black and whites were rerun then. And then they disappeared. And all you saw were the color, the first run shows and then the color reruns. So I didn't see Alice Pearce again on a Bewitched episode until 1977. And that was not from a local station. It was from 90 miles away. And it had to be a good day to get to see it. The picture was very fuzzy. The sound was okay. But if the weather was not perfect, you know. And so that was, you know, by 1977, I had already been researching her, but was just about to lose hope that I'd ever see the Bewitched shows again.
Well, I want to talk about that path. According to your notes, you started really working on this book around 1975. It's one thing to think about writing a book. It's a completely different thing to write it and get it published. What was the driving force with you, especially when it came to Alice Pearce?
I think that a big part of it was I was emotionally attached to her tragic end. When I realized that she was only 48 years old and that she wasn't around anymore, and I had not experienced death of a close family member by that time, and so it really pained me. It really hurt me, and I think and I would just a kid, I would wish she had not have died, and I know there were plenty more like me. But I think that really became a major driving force. And also, there was hardly any information available to me about her. And so any little scrap I could find, any book that had her name in it, I bought it. And then later on, I began to contact people who had actually known her. And the doors began to open that way. But it was, as I say, a private passion for a long time. I really didn't tell anybody about it. I mean, my parents knew and some of my friends knew, but it was not your typical teenage hobby. And it was like a hobby. And I remember I didn't have a single picture of her. I had one book that had a small picture of her from on the town. Somehow I found out about a store on Hollywood Boulevard called Larry Edmonds Bookshop, which is still there. And I wrote to them, do you have any pictures of Alice Pearce? Well, they sent a postcard back and said they had 3 portraits. Each cost $1.50. I didn't have any money. I think I was 14, 15, didn't have a part-time job. And I had to beg my mother, give me a check. I said, these pictures cost $1.50 a piece. And she's still that way now. She's 90 years old. And
God bless her.
She thinks everything should be 29 cents or $1.49 or whatever. But I had to beg her for those 3 pictures. And when you open my book, the portrait of Alice that is across from the title page, that's the very first picture I ever bought of her. And I've never seen it published anywhere else in a magazine or on the internet. It's never shown up that I know of. So I said that has to go opposite the title page because that was my first picture of her.
Well, I remember in the mid-1970s, there were not a lot of books about theater and film and everything.
No.
And then all of a sudden, all these autobiographies started coming out, and That's Entertainment, the movie opened. And there was such a resurgence at that time for nostalgia and looking back. So the fact that you were on this path really on the very beginning of that happening, when did you begin to find a groove with writing the book, or did that happen? Her earlier life, I'm assuming, was probably very difficult to find a lot of details about.
I used every clue that I could. About the first breakthrough that I had was I wrote to James Robert Parrish, who is still an author,
Yes.
movie-related books. I wrote to him, and he put me on to the New York Public Library, the Billy Rose Theater Collection. Little did I know that they had files on everybody, clippings files, and so they reproduced all of Alice's clippings that they had on file, and so I learned a lot about her that way. Next, like I said, I started contacting people that knew her. So some would speak with me on the phone, others would write letters, some would never respond.
Mm-hmm.
And to find out about her early life, I went to Los Angeles finally. It was my dream to go there because her papers, most of them had been left to USC in Los Angeles. And so it was my dream to go there and research the collection because by that point I was serious about writing a book. And so I found out a lot about her early life that way. And then I made road trips to Missouri, to the little town where her mother grew up. And there was a little lady there, 85 years old. She was a former beautician. And she had done Alice Pearce's grandmother's hair every Thursday night. She made a house call and she washed Alice's grandmother's hair and set it every week. So she knew all about Alice as a young person because Alice would come to Missouri occasionally and visit. And then her grandmother would tell her all these stories. And Dorothy, the former beautician, had remembered a lot of them. So she helped me a lot. Alice had no children, no siblings, no first cousins on her mother's side. She had 3 first cousins on the father's side, but they were all deceased by the time I got really serious. And
like you, she was an only child.
Yes. So, I was dependent on any documents left behind and any people still alive who could tell me some things. Now, Dorothy, the former beautician, had known Alice as a child. They were about 22 months apart. And so she had played with Alice and she knew her as a child, although they were very different because Dorothy was a small town girl and Alice was visiting from Brussels or Paris and much more sophisticated than the other kids in Perry, Missouri.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw out some things that you talk about in the book. We're not going to give away a lot tonight because we want you to buy the book. It is available, but we are going to give away a book tonight at the end of the show. So stick around and we will announce a winner. I'm going to pull a name. But I also, I want to go back to her parents. Her father was a banker. And as a small child, if you can talk a little bit about her childhood and then the accident that she experienced when she was 7 years old.
Well, she was a very, very shy child. She did not have much contact with a lot of other children. And the reason being was that she was born in New York, but when she was not yet 2 years old, her father was transferred from the National City Bank of New York to its branch in Belgium. And so she actually spoke French before she spoke English and didn't have much association with other children for whatever reason, I guess her parents' decision. So when she did finally go to school, it was a finishing school, a private, exclusive finishing school in Brussels. Most of the girls were older than she. And by finishing school, we mean it was not your typical academic subjects. It was, art, drama. They took them to the opera. They taught them how to sit and walk and hold a teacup and, carry on a conversation, that kind of thing. Paint, those kinds of things. So her academic instruction was limited to those kinds of things. And she was, I think, very close to her parents. They were very protective of her. She, when she would come home, come to the States to visit her grandmother or her grandfather, her other grandfather, Grandfather Pearce in Belle Fountain, Ohio, she envied the kids her own age because there she could walk around town by herself. She could walk to the drugstore and get a Coca-Cola or an ice cream cone, but her parents wouldn't let her walk around Brussels or Paris by herself. So she later said that she hated living in Europe, that all the while she really wanted to be a typical American kid. And she, finally moved to the States by herself. Her parents sent her to a prep school in Dobbs Ferry, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was educated there. And that was a big change for her, because it was a very strict boarding school, and the emphasis was on religion and academics, totally different from the school in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what else? What else?
No, she had the accident that changed eventually her.
Yes. Yeah. Well, in Brussels, when she was 9 years old, she was in a park on a swing, swinging up high, and she said she thought she remembered trying to impress some boys with how high she could swing, but she lost her grip and fell out of the swing and landed right on her chin.
Mm-hmm.
And according to one of her friends, her jaw was broken, and she, had to have that corrected.
Mm-hmm.
But it stunted the growth in her chin, and so that accounted for her appearance as an adult and as a teenager and as an adult. And as a result, she became very self-conscious about that. How we are during our teen years, when, you're worried about, a pimple or your hair's not fixed right or whatever. Well, she went through the same kind of thing as a teenager. She felt she was unattractive, and she always compared herself to her mother, who was very outgoing and charming and the perfect hostess. And Alice was demure and quiet and, not really very much a people person at that time, I think. And so her mother had carried her to all these specialists all over Europe to have something done. I think the mother was more self-conscious about Alice's chin than she was.
Mm-hmm. And
I think that really affected her self-confidence, Alice's self-confidence. So, but later on, as she realized that, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. So
and she certainly did.
She certainly did.
If you can take us back to the origins of her first big act in New York, when she started to make a splash when she was at the Blue Angel.
Yes. Well, she started at the top, because honestly, that was the
pinnacle. It was the pinnacle.
New York, yes. And she had expressed an interest in performing in nightclubs earlier than that. And the owner of the Blue Angel said, well, get something together, and when you have more experience, come back. And so she partnered with a friend of hers that she had met at Princeton. They had performed together at Princeton, although, of course, she was a student at Princeton, but they needed some females for their drama productions. And so she and this other fella, Mark Lawrence was his name, he really wrote a lot of her material. She had input, of course, but it was just zany stuff that nobody had ever attempted before. Today, when you hear some of the songs, you wonder, what's the big deal about this? But to people in the post-war years, and most people did not have television or anything like that at that time.
But it was a little avant-garde, and it was off the wall. It was zany and all those things.
Yes, they took some things, put new words to it. One thing she did was they played a recording of Nelson Eddy singing. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten the name, but it's like a military march song.
Give me some men who are stout-hearted men. Was that it?
I don't know. I don't know if that was it or not. That was, of course, one of his. But anyway, she took his recording and took it to a studio and had it slowed down, and sped up. So the voice was like that, And so she would lip sync to this recording. And another thing she did, she sang a song called 2 Cigarettes in the Dark. And she would put 2 cigarettes in her mouth and smoke them while she sang. And of course, she was coughing all over the place. And, it was that kind of thing. But, you couldn't get in the door at the Blue Angel because everybody wanted to go see her. And that was spring of 47. And she was such a hit. They had her come back in the fall. And again, the next year she was back. And, the celebrities crammed the joint. Myrna Loy, Noel Coward even came backstage to, sing her praises, and that moved her to tears.
Well, and you mentioned earlier on that relationship went in a completely different direction. Read the book, read about that. But one of the things that he did say, he said she could get a laugh out of saying "pass the mustard."
Yes.
Yes. But you, and then of course, all of this major acclaim that she's getting in leads her to Broadway in On the Town. If you can tell us about that. And do you know the story about On the Town getting to MGM?
You mean the movie?
Well, Louis Mayer's mistress was also his secretary, came to New York, and she saw On the Town and fell in love with it. And she told him to buy the rights for it. And then he found out that the music was by Leonard Bernstein, and he was not a big fan of Leonard Bernstein. So he bought the rights, but it sat on the shelf for a few years. And then when Gene Kelly was going to be directing his first film, he gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to with the film. And that takes us to this next story.
Which one?
That he brought her to Hollywood.
Oh, yes. Well, she was the only member of the original cast of the Broadway production to repeat her role for the film version. And Gene Kelly saw to that. I'm told he was, he wanted her. And actually her part in the part of Lucy Schmeler in the Broadway version, as Rex Reed said, it was a nothing part. I mean, she didn't even sing. But in the film version, they beefed it up. And she has that wonderful number, You Can Count on Me, where she does, she tries to be very sensuous with her tango with Gene Kelly. And her sneeze is just fabulous, a fabulous ending to that number. But the role was, very, very funny, but it was also a touching role. Her final scene with Gene, because she's his blind date. He's not really attracted to her, but he lets her down as gently as he can. And it's a very memorable scene when they part company on the doorstep.
Well, Fredrick, when I look at a person's career, I see that many times that it's a matter of being at the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's ambition. Sometimes it's all these things. But one of the things that I really get from your book, and I want to talk about some of the elements of this, were the friendships that she made along the way. Because everybody loved her. She was a giving person. I'll share this photograph with you. One of my dear friends was this lady right here, Carol Chan. And I did not know until I read your book about the relationship that Alice had with Carol's son, Chan. If you can talk a little bit about that for a few moments.
Well, I found out in 1982, I wrote to Carol Channing, and I received just a very brief note. She said that it was impossible for her to write about Alice Pearce, but if we were ever in the same place, we could talk about her. Well, of course, that never happened. I was like, how am I going to be in the same place with Carol Channing? But she did write in the note that Alice was the godmother of Chan Lo, Carol's son. And so I did a little bit of digging and found him in 2013. And he said that his parents actually referred to Alice as Chan's love aunt. And, I grew up with folks like that they weren't my relatives, but I called them aunt or uncle, whomever. But they didn't get to see each other often because Chan was not always in New York City, where Alice was based. But when they were together, they had a very unique friendship. I think he said when he was 5 years old, she decided that whenever they got together, that they must each wear something green. And they made a pact that every time they got together, they would do that. And so she showed up one time wearing green fingernail polish and green lipstick. And Chan said, I have no idea where she got green lipstick in the 1950s, but there she was with green lipstick. And she signed all her notes to him in that smeared green lipstick. And one day, not too awfully long ago, Chan told me that in 2013, but one day I was rereading Auntie Mame, the book by Patrick Dennis, and I was stunned to see, I guess I'd read it years ago, but I didn't remember this picky detail, but Auntie Mame, the first time she met her nephew, Patrick Dennis, she was wearing green fingernail polish. And so I thought, okay, Alice must have been channeling Mame Dennis when she came up with the green idea. I don't know. But she certainly seemed to be sort of an Auntie Mame character for Chan. And he described on one day, she told him, I'm coming to spend the day with you. I'm going to take you anywhere in the city you want to go and do whatever you want to do. And he said, I want for us to climb to the top of the Statue of Liberty. Well, he said she toughed it out and they made it all the way to the top. And then later they had a picnic in Central Park. They bought food for a picnic and spread out a cloth on the ground and had a picnic. And she was exhausted when she finally delivered him home. But he loved her very much. And I heard from him just today. And he said how he wished so much that she had lived longer, that he was only 13 when she died.
Well, Chan, if you're watching, God bless you. And I mean, it's great stories in the book, but you bring up Patrick Dennis, and that brings me to Chris Alexander. I mean, yes. Chris Alexander did all these great photographs with Patrick Dennis, and your book is dedicated to the memory of Chris Alexander. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Chris?
What a great man. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I wanted to find him most of all because I knew they were connected with On the Town. I didn't really know how close they were, but I felt they must have been close because she appeared in two of Patrick Dennis's books, First Lady and Little Me. And so I did not know how to contact Chris Alexander. This was in the 80s, and didn't know he was still a photographer. I wrote to Patrick Dennis's widow, Louise Tanner, and I asked her, here is a letter for Chris Alexander. Would you see that he gets it, please? And of course she did. And a little while later, he wrote to me and said that she had forwarded the letter. And he said, I'm about to retire. And he said, I am in the midst of cleaning out rooms of old photographs, old prints. And he said, I'm tossing a lot of them, but he said, I've never tossed one of Alice. And he explained how close that they were. And they called each other bro and sis. He was an only child too. And so they were very, very close. And he sent me over 100 pictures of Alice Pearce that nobody's seen. I mean, very few of them were ever published. And these were just gag shots, they were just doing them for the heck of it, just for fun. Some of them were published in the books, but most of them, I guess he was practicing his art, or they were just playing around, just having a good time. And so it was a huge box full of pictures. You can imagine some of them, 11 by 14 and 16 by 20 and just wonderful things. Some I have framed here in my home. But we carried on a written communication for 20 years. And I don't know if you ever saw any of his
oh my God, yeah,
handmade Christmas cards. Did you ever get any?
Yeah, well, I didn't get any personally, and that'll bring us to another associate of Alice's. I was very fortunate to have as a very dear friend for the past 15 years of her life, Dodie Goodman.
Yeah.
And Dodie and Alice were very close, and I saw the cards and everything. And and Dodie is also in those photographs. We are going to run out of time, and we definitely want to cover, the latter part of her life as well. Yeah. Again, I cannot stress, you've got to read this book. It's incredible. She went back and forth. She was fortunate enough to have one of those careers where she could go from Broadway to television to film. She covered all gamuts. She was in the early stages of television, did the numbers. The filmography is just amazing with what she did. Her last Broadway show was Sail Away. The circumstances from that, led her back to Hollywood, where she basically settled for the rest of her life. And can you take us up, because most of the people that are watching here know her as Gladys Kravitz. They know that. And just before we get that, she talks about, she reached a point in her life that every actor or actress dreams of. And that's when you see in the trades, we're looking for an Alice Pearce type. Mm-hmm. And she said she went to an audition and all the people were sitting around. They says, well, we might as well leave because Alice Pearce is here. And she said, thank God they didn't leave because somebody else got the part.
That's right.
So if you can take us back to late 1963, early 64, when the beginnings of Bewitched are beginning to happen. And also the diagnosis that she got.
Yes. Well, actually that, the diagnosis was long before Bewitched. Not long before.
Yes.
But, she evidently had symptoms that something was wrong, but put off going to the doctor. She didn't even have a family doctor after she relocated to Los Angeles. And she, her friend Paul Davis ran a framing shop and an art gallery in West Hollywood. And one day, his friend Carol Cook came in with her husband, and Carol said she noticed right away that Alice's abdomen looked distended. And in fact, Alice even mentioned to it. She said, I don't know what's wrong. I can't hold my tummy in anymore. And Carol said, what does your doctor say? And Alice said, well, I haven't been to the doctor. And Carol said, you should go. And she recommended her own personal doctor, whose name was Dr. Kravitz. Well, Alice did go to Dr. Kravitz. He was just a general practitioner. He knew immediately there was something terribly wrong. He sent her to a specialist who wanted to do exploratory surgery. She already had some film work lined up, so she again put that off. And when the work was finished, she went into the hospital, and they learned from the surgery that she had ovarian cancer, and that there was absolutely nothing that could be done, no treatment. And she didn't know whether she had 3 weeks or 3 years. She spent the last 21 months of her life nonstop. She squeezed in so much in those final months. And one thing was accepting the part on Bewitched. And it was not to be a regular role. Mm-hmm. They told her that, and she was handpicked for it. She did not have to audition for that. She didn't have to read for it. She was the only one they called. And now I just lost my train of thought.
No, you were talking about how much she crammed into.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, she got that part thinking it would only be a 1 or 2 time thing. But even before any of those shows were telecast, the producer and the director knew, hey, we got to use this character more. We got to use this actress more. She's terrific, which they knew she would be. But they decided, this needs to be a big part of the show. So she was finally offered a contract, a regular contract, and still didn't tell them that, her life was ticking away, and worked up until the very last day that she could stand. And not only that, but she made another movie.
She got married?
She got married. She bought her first home. She went back east and closed up her apartment, sold her beach house. Her aunt had died and left her a house full of French antiques. She supervised having that all moved to the coast. She packed every minute full, and you got to admire her courage. She never let on. She never complained, according to the people on the Bewitched show. Well,
it's interesting. She's got this amazing career long before Bewitched. I mean, her body, I like to refer to it as a body of worth. Her body of worth before she even got to Bewitched was unbelievable. And yet, the last months of her life, as you say, she worked until, and if you watch the season, her last season on the show, you can see the deterioration happening right before your very eyes. But she was a trooper. She kept going. And interestingly enough, with everything she did, she wins. I get teary thinking about it. She wins her Emmy posthumously.
Yes. It was just amazing, really. Just really amazing that at this point in her life, when everything should have been dark, she made the very best of it, and it should be a lesson to the rest of us when bad things happen to us. But so
you and I are both. We're in our 60s. I feel like I've yet to begin to live my life, and I look at her life, 48, and yet she accomplished so much. And
yes.
Writing this book, first of all, it's a labor of love that you put into this, and it's obviously the love that you also have for her. What was the biggest thing that surprised you about her, above all else? Her work ethic, the people that she knew, the accomplishments that she made. What surprised you the most about her?
I don't know. That's so hard to say because, I've done the research so long ago. I guess really is the friendships that she made. I mean, I don't know any show business people. I don't know, how many of them develop lifelong friendships from almost every project, but she did. I mean, Nancy Walker, Carol Channing, Chris Alexander, Richard Deacon. These were, all Mark Lawrence, all these people that she worked with. And the thing that impressed me the most, I can say that, the thing that impressed me the most that I read a very long time ago, just a little blurb about her in an old book that said, everyone loved Alice. I thought, well, maybe that's just a generalization. Maybe that man really knew the facts. I don't know. But I like to think that up until the point that I discovered that was every bit true. Everybody loved her. And the title of the book, Sweet Oddball, I picked that for 3 reasons. One, she looked forward to playing more sweet oddball roles, as she called them, when she got older, which we know she didn't live to do. Another was that she was something of an oddball herself. When she was young, she didn't fit in with, wasn't around other children, so she had that handicap. She didn't fit in with the girls at the finishing school or with the prep school. She finally found her place in acting. She wasn't eccentric, and like you, I'm her fellow oddball. But sweet, you wouldn't believe the number of times of people who wrote to me or spoke with me who used that adjective to describe her. So I knew this is the perfect title. It has to be. So I think that's. I
mean, beyond this image that we have of her, she had a great fashion sense. She loved her hats. She wore gloves. She was all of those things that you expect, and maybe those are the lessons that she got from going to finishing schools and everything
Oh,
that she brought along with her. But there was an elegance about her. But all she needs to do, I mean, as I'm reading the book again, I'm remembering performances that stand out. Disorderly, orderly, just talking about her elements. Seeing her in Tammy and the Doctor. And you describe in the book also, and it's true to go back, everyone, and look at this, that was one role where she basically, for lack of a better term, played it straight.
Yes.
And still gets the laughs.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, do you have a favorite role beyond Gladys Kravitz that you really love her, that you resonate to over and over again?
Well, of course, Lucy Schmealer. I mean, that was her signature role up until Gladys Kravitz. But I'll tell you, one of the best things she ever did was in a television special, tiny part. But I mean, she nailed that thing. She plays this housewares sales lady in a department store. And it's Christmas time. And this man comes in looking for his wife's gift. And she's trying so hard to sell him this ice cream maker. And she turns from very sugary to very vinegary when she can't convince him to buy this thing. And that was one great thing about her talent. She could really switch gears, and so smoothly, you know, from being very sweet to very acidulous. I mean, you know, she was versatile. She didn't get to show that always, but that's one of the best things she ever did. But the disorderly, orderly, I just wish the camera had lingered on her instead of Jerry Lewis.
I agree. I totally agree. Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you one last question, and you're going to know the reason why I'm asking you this question. Have you ever driven a bus?
No, Lord, no.
Do you want to tell everyone? Let's leave them with the bus story.
Well, Alice Pearce could not drive. She wanted to drive because she was up for a part back in New York where she had to drive a car. She'd never needed to drive a car living in New York. And so she took driving lessons. And the only ones she could get were, what did she call them? Black market driving instructor. And he took her out on 2nd Avenue and all that traffic, and she didn't know what she was doing, and he was ready to jump out of the car. But she got this part in My Six Loves, a Debbie Reynolds movie, as a school bus driver. And because she didn't know how to drive, they had to put a man down in the floorboard to work the pedals, because she would get the brake mixed up with I guess they have a clutch, I don't know, clutch or accelerator. But anyway, they said Debbie Reynolds was laughing so hard she ruined her makeup. I don't know how many takes it took, but she said, now I can drive anything. She said, as long as it's a bus.
Well, I want to say to you, first of all, thank you, Jeff Smith, for recommending.
Yeah.
Yes, he recommended that I sit down and do this interview with you. I hope you've had half as much fun as I have. I love this book so much. You know, if anyone loves film and everything, and just even to learn about her private life and the people and the friendships. And as I'm reading the book, I'm going to drop a few names, and forgive me for saying this, but I've been around a long time, and I've been fortunate enough to call Carlton Carpenter a friend. He's got a birthday coming up, so happy birthday, Carlton. Dodie Goodman, Carol Cook, Carol Channing. And as I'm reading this book, I feel like I'm reading 6 Degrees of Separation.
Yes.
I never got a chance to know Alice Pearce personally outside of this book, but you've given a glimpse into her life that beyond what I've seen on screen. So huge kudos to you. Are you currently working on something else? I want to ask.
I haven't started. I'm trying to recuperate from this. I just really submitted the manuscript in February. So since then, you know, it's been quite busy, but I would like to write about more character actresses. I'm also a genealogy nut, so I want to write a family history too.
That's great. Now, Kenna Owens, Is Kenna a friend of yours?
Kenna taught in my school district. Are you there, Kenna?
Kenna is the winner of our book tonight.
Wow, Kenna.
So you'll make sure that Kenna will get a copy of the book. You'll take care of that. Great. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I know that for the last hour, you could have been anywhere. And the fact that you chose to spend it with us, I know I can speak for Fredrick when I say this, we don't take it lightly. It means a lot to me that you're here. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time, all of my shows are about celebrating artists and their body of worth. Please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. If you enjoyed tonight's show, hit the like button, leave a comment on YouTube, and share this. That will increase the ranking of this. And the more people who see this, the more those book sales will happen. So we want to sell lots of books here. And we want new generations. Those of us who knew and grew up watching Alice Pearce on television and film, may this continue thanks to this book. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I always end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list, and the 7th name that pops up, reach out with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private message, but a phone call. And let them know what they mean to you. As a dear friend of mine says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what someone else is going through right now. And I say, if you're going to be on a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. Now, Fredrick, I'm going to leave the screen, and I'm actually going to give you the final word. Anything that you want to say about anything that we talked about tonight that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish that we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone who's watching. And please promise me that when the next book comes out, that you'll come back to this show.
Yes.
Thank you. You've got the stage to yourself.
I'd like to thank Jeffrey Smith for telling me about Richard Skipper. I didn't know who Richard Skipper was until about 6 weeks ago. And Richard Skipper, you are a gem, such a professional. The hour went by like that. I felt like I was talking to an old friend. It was great. I enjoyed it. And I guess the takeaway for me really is now that the book has been printed, it's a culmination of a project that was a very personal project, a private passion of mine for so long. But now I really know, because of the internet and formats like this, I really know how many other people out there love and adore Alice Pearce. So I've made a whole flock of new friends thanks to technology. Thank you, Richard.